Off you go, George.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Kubernetes community team meeting. It is April the 20th of 2017. I'm George Castro. If you haven't met me yet, I recently started at Heptio to help do all sorts of community things. So you'll see me helping out Sarah and Elsie where I can. So I'm going to start off my first week by emceeing this meeting. So Jason, you've got the notes, right? And I'll go ahead and toss a URL to the notes in the YouTube video description and in chat. So first thing we have today is a demo of Auto-Tree Cloud Providers in Kubernetes by Siddhartha Mani. Are you present?
Sid had confirmed that he would join us.
This is a very exciting topic.
It is actually. I'm kind of.
Which one?
Sid is a really exciting topic for our.
Auto-Tree Cloud Providers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
we may be able to double back to him.
yep. And I see Caleb is here, so let's go ahead and move on to the release team summaries. The first one's for 1.7 release team summary. Caleb.
We really don't have audio for Caleb.
I see him in chat.
Yeah. How about now?
There we go.
Cool. Hey, so Phil and I have been working on a couple things related to release management for 1.7 moving forward. We've got a draft up for a new SIG release focused on long-term release health and management, improvement of the entire process. And we've got a draft proposal out for selection criteria for the release team for 1.7. So I can't see the agenda right yet, but I'll be sure to add those in the meeting agenda docs.
Hey, this is Garrett speaking. I also, as per the discussion on the Kubernetes dev thread, I reopened the PR that proposes the release team. If you have any comments, it's open in the community repo. I'll paste it into the chat. But I think we wanted to get that approved today as well.
Oh, also the 1.6 retrospective is tomorrow. Tomorrow. Just to announce that as well.
So in order to move us to a release team in the PR, what would you like, Garrett, in order to get us moved forward? You said you want to try and approve it today. What kind of approval?
That's a very good question. I think we're trying to find this process for future releases right now.
So the lazy consensus version?
Yeah, lazy consensus I think is what we're gonna have to go with now. On the thread that was that's going around Kubernetes dev, there's a request for other candidates. It looks like there's been no other comments on it, so I think we're kind of at lazy consensus right now.
Okay. Do you want to ping that thread, say last call kind of thing, point to the PR and call it done at 5 o'clock if we haven't heard otherwise?
Sounds excellent, Sarah. I will take that approach.
Sweet.
And just for the video in this meeting, what is the current status of the thread and the proposal?
I think there was a call for additional candidates, and there's been no response since.
But what are the current candidates?
I think Maru was going to take on the secondary or shadowing role. Don was looking to do the release team manager. Andrew was the docs lead, Andrew Chen. Wojtek was asking to do the patch releases for the minor releases in July. And I think Ihor wanted the features lead.
Yep.
We've got a pull request with all of the
Yep.
candidates.
I just
too.
thought it'd be good just to say that aloud, that's all.
Yep.
I think, weren't there some candidates for other positions in the other PR, Garrett?
Let me look back at that. So I hadn't heard anything. There was a guy from Microsoft, Caleb, that you proposed as well.
Anthony, who was part of the 1.6 release team, Anthony Howe from Microsoft, proposed someone for probably an additional shadow for release team.
Yeah, this is Brendan. Her name is Shruti.
Shruti, okay.
I'll ping them again today to validate and comment onto the Kubernetes dev thread.
Yeah, and on the PR, if they're interested in doing it, let me know and I can just add it to the PR.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also thinking of some of the other positions like testing and upgrades.
It's still unfilled.
Yeah, I thought there were some volunteers there, and certainly those are important things. So if there were, we should make sure they get included.
Okay.
Okay, anything else for 1.7?
The 170 Alpha 2 went out this morning. Just
Woo.
because there's no team, we decided Don suggested to stick to whatever the proposed schedule was to keep things rolling.
Makes sense.
That's awesome. So 1702 alpha. 1.7.0.2 alpha.
Or it's the other way. It's 1.7.0 alpha.
Point oh, alpha
Yes.
2. Got it.
Yes,
Okay.
alpha 2.
I was like,
Yep.
wait, we just added another alpha.
Yeah.
Alpha 2
It's the second
cut
alpha.
this morning. Yeah, I was like, yeah. Awesome. Okay. Thank you. Okay, 1.7. Anything else that we need to talk about ahead of 1.7 or of the 1.7 work? All right.
Okay, moving on to 1.6. Anthony, are you here?
Yes. So 1.6.2 went out yesterday. Haven't heard any reports back on people using it yet.
Do we, I'm sure I was going to talk about Alpha, but do we have users of Alpha? Do we have any way to tell if people are taking the Alphas and doing anything with them, or even the betas or the RCs?
No.
Okay, that's something interesting to add to the release questions, that's all.
Yeah, RCs are especially important, and the alphas are mainly a service to people who want to pick them up and use them for testing and stuff.
Okay.
But the betas and the RCs, we really do need to get people using those
So
sooner.
Caleb, can we add that as an item for release? And as I'm getting more roped up in that, we'll bring it up. I'm sorry, I'm still on 1.7. I'm a little slow. I apologize.
Yeah, I do know that the kubeadmin folks do consume some of the early artifacts.
I think that there's things that we can do to better publicize it. That's all. We just take it as an action item for SIG release.
Yep.
And I would tie into that same action item the potential of beta documentation when we actually come out with betas or release candidates, making sure we have docs.
Yep.
Cool. So
Okay.
1.6. Awesome. And I don't think we have Marcin with us this morning. Does anyone know if there was a same time 1.5 patch release? Anthony, do you by chance know?
I don't think there's a
Okay, no patch this time. Okay, so no significant update on 1.5. Awesome.
Any other release things before we move to the SIG updates? Okay, SIG updates. Signode. Derek, are you here?
Yep, I'm here. Hopefully people can hear me. So I'll give a quick rundown on what we're looking at these days in Signode. So I guess there's been a lot going on recently. At a high level for things that people might be interested in when we're looking at what we want to work on in a 1.7 timeframe. We're continuing to look to enhance or basically improve the CRI interface to cover some missing gaps from an API definition standpoint that are there today. Those gaps would include the ability to not necessarily have some way of reporting monitoring metrics from individual container runtimes without requiring necessarily to go through CAdvisor. Clearing up or cleaning up what the logging requirements contracts will be between the CRI and individual container runtimes, as well as probably looking at some amount of improved API versioning of the CRI interface itself. And then behind that, there's a whole group of individuals who are off building implementations according to that spec that will continue to iterate this release cycle. So that's kind of an update on the CRI. There's also an effort to try to simplify how the node is brought up using some amount of dynamic kubelet configuration. And that effort I still think is a bit early, but I think we're targeting some amount of alpha support for that this release. There's some work going on across Signode and SIG scheduling to support an improved priority preemption eviction schema. So some folks have probably seen the work that David Oppenheimer put out there describing a long-term vision for that. In the near term, this might mean that the kubelet evicts things slightly different than how it chooses to make evictions decisions today, which are largely based on clause, to potentially do it around something being dubbed priority. So if folks are interested in that, I encourage you to review the document that David put out and give comments. Then there's been a lot of work going on recently across Signode and SIG scheduling as well, where there's a lot of interest in the community to support more performance-sensitive workloads, or just the ability to run certain workloads more optimally on the node than what is available today. And so we've been running a resource management work group that's basically a joint effort across Signode and scheduling, where we try to bring together topics that have an intersection between those two spaces. And those meetings are being recorded and uploaded to YouTube if folks want to participate. But in that context, we've been discussing a number of topics. So there's been a lot of interest in the community around GPU support, and in particular, folks from NVIDIA have been really great at bringing up requirements around GPU support more generally to help push the alpha level features today we have around GPU and Cube towards something more feature complete. In addition, we've been discussing topics around local storage management. So basically the idea there is how the kubelet can manage your host disk more efficiently and slightly more opinionated, so that it can potentially do things like manage the amount of logging space your containers get, can control how much host disk you're able to use, and potentially control your ability to create things like local persistent volumes, as well as control the amount of copy on write storage you can consume on a per container basis. So basically at this point, we're trying to get like a long-term direction in place for what the kubelet can do with local disk management, and then out of that, figure out what we can iterate on in the near term. I suspect that'll be an item that will roll out over a series of releases. But generally the theme is how do we treat disk as a first class of resource type.
Yeah, SIG storage is also overlapping with that quite a bit. And we actually think we're going to have deliverables in 1.7 and things that users will start benefiting from.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certain parts of that proposal that are less contentious than other parts. And so I think like the local PV stuff with SIG storage is probably around that space. And then some of the other things around, say, copy on write storage enforcement or particular log management might not happen within this release or might not reach consensus.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. This is, I think we're focusing a few SIGs, and it's funny that Vish is kind of, at least on my side, it looks like he's bridging node and storage. So he's participating in both quite a bit, and it seems staffed from a whole bunch of different folks and companies. But it's going to go on for, I think I described it in the SIG storage group as an 18-wheel truck that's going to be driving for a while, at least a year, before we actually feel like things settled. And then we'll look back at it and go, what did we do?
Yeah, and I would say generally we're reaching a point of complexity around certain resource types that that theme of it will take some time is probably not unique. So the other major topic I want to talk about is basically we at Red Hat and those at Intel and some other members of the community have been more interested in also, as I said, supporting more performance sensitive workloads. And that's drawing out some topics around things like how do we hand out devices to individual containers, how we can look to maybe support concepts like CPU affinity or NUMA node awareness in the kubelet, so that users who want to support workloads that can run more optimally with these things can get some measure of support in the kubelet. So around these resource management topics in mind, we've basically had a number of productive meetings, and we felt that, like, in order to move the ball forward, we wanted to get a face-to-face of interested members in the community. And so we have a face-to-face planned for May 1st through the 3rd that Google has graciously agreed to host, and a number of interested participants have signed up to join, where we're going to be discussing these topics around more advanced resource management and isolation generally. And so that is something that I know a number of us are looking forward to in the community, and hopefully looking to get a roadmap in place that we can proceed on, the remainder of the year and moving forward. So a lot's been going on in Signode, and a lot of the stuff in Signode has been intersecting other SIGs. And so if folks are interested, of course, we'd love you guys to join and participate and reach out. Any questions?
What's the best way for somebody to get involved with a face-to-face meeting? Do they contact you, or is there a sign-up?
So an invite was sent out to the Signode mailing list and the SIG scheduling mailing list, and I think it might have even gone to Kubernetes Dev as well, announcing it. And then there was a long process involved in trying to identify who would be interested in attending, and if they were interested in attending, where in the world they were from, and then what timeframes we could host it at. And there was a lot of back and forth on that because of conferences and stuff that we settled on this time. But if you are interested in attending, I can paste the link in the meeting notes here. There's basically an open invite where you'll add your name to your list that you're interested in participating, and you're more than welcome to join. I think right now we have about 13 or 14 community participants plus some number of Googlers. I don't know the exact number.
Yeah, I think it's about half a dozen Googlers at this point. So it's about 20 people, which I think is good because there'll be some breakout conversations too.
Yep.
Another neat note was that on High Performance, Derek, I don't know if you saw, were you at KubeCon Europe or no?
I was not.
Yeah, I thought so. I was looking for you, dude. I missed you. It looks like there's two really good vendors who did a lot of high performance work that have actually offered things to the open source community for Kubernetes. So that's something else that, I should reach out to you and show you some of the examples, because they did some very, very cool code with high performance networking and storage.
Yeah, I'd be loving to see that. I know various other members of the community have been working on other prototyping activities around opaque integer resources and doing some other measure of isolation that are also interesting. So
it looks like they've turned into a product, which is kind of nice. They look a little bit ahead of people. That's it. I don't want to derail this meeting, but we should reach out to each other.
Yep. But yeah, for those who want to attend, I will try to get a link in the meeting notes, and would love to have you participate. That's it for me.
Cool. Any other questions for Signode? Okay, moving on. SIG Instrumentation with Peter and Fabian.
Hey, I'm Piotr. So there will be no Fabian today, so I will give an update. So basically, as you may know, last year we agreed and proposed some long-term monitoring in logging vision. And this year, 2017, is just executing on this vision. As a part of this vision, basically there are two parts of monitoring architecture. One is core metrics pipeline, and another one is integration with third-party monitoring solutions. So regarding third-party monitoring solutions, basically, as a SIG, we do not have much to do right now, but rather, ask those vendors to make the integration better. And of course, we would like to introduce some documentation around this, and maybe some guidelines for them how to integrate. But yeah. And regarding a core metrics pipeline, the major component of core metrics pipeline is metrics server. So in this quarter, particularly, we would like to implement this metric server. There is already a proof of concept of metric server implemented in Hipster, and we would like to, extract this part of Hipster and make it, a first class secondary API server, which will be responsible just for metrics. And there is also master metrics API defined in alpha, which is a Kubernetes API to serve metrics. And this quarter, we would like to maybe move it to beta, or at least start a discussion about, what are the requirements, what are thoughts, and, make some progress on this. So in another thing that we are focusing on is that in Q1, we defined custom metrics API for horizontal pod autoscaler purposes. And the API is in alpha, but there is no implementation of this. So in this quarter, we would like to focus on providing some implementation of this custom metrics API. Probably we would like to provide at least 3 implementations for Prometheus, for Ocular, and for Stackdriver. But if there is any other people interested in providing an implementation of this API, feel free to reach me, or Solly Ross from Red Hat, who is driving this effort. Okay, so another update. There is Kube-State Metrics project, which is a pretty small project about providing some metrics about Kubernetes objects in Prometheus format. It's more or less implemented, and we would like to put some effort to stabilize this for 1.7 and, let's say, graduate into GA, whatever it means. And what else? So there is an idea to also introduce historical metrics API. I'm not sure whether we will have time to move forward with this idea, but yeah, this is definitely in the scope of our interest. We also let's say introduced logging area to SIG Instrumentation, and logging is a hard topic. It's also, it touches Signode, SIG storage, and we would like to define a similar long-term architecture vision for logging that we provided for monitoring. But as I mentioned, it's more complicated because it's overlap with the other work. In this quarter, we would like to start some discussion around this long-term vision.
So quick question, when you talk about long-term vision and APIs, are we talking about APIs in the core, or are these ancillary systems that are going to be optional?
So it depends. So master metrics API, are you asking about logging or monitoring?
Both. I mean,
okay.
As we require monitoring to do things like scaling, there's a question of drag monitoring into the core or find ways to break scaling out. So that the more sustainable way moving forward is to find ways to break more things out of the core.
Yeah, I see. So basically, regarding monitoring, there will be a couple of APIs. There will be master metrics API, which will serve basic resource usage metrics for core Kubernetes components to make sure that they can operate smoothly. And this will be part of core Kubernetes, and the implementation will be provided out of the box via metric server and Kube aggregator. And there will be also a number of optional APIs like a custom metrics API and historical API, which will be, implemented by third-party monitoring solutions. There can be either an adapter or just an implementation as a part of this third-party monitoring solutions. So for example, when horizontal pod autoscaler wants to scale your pods based on custom metrics, you need to provide an implementation of this API. And it can be done by, I don't know, installing Prometheus in your cluster and assuming Prometheus will provide an implementation of this API.
I think on that one, I know Sally from Red Hat is actually starting to work this next 3 weeks or so on a custom metric API adapted for Prometheus. So if folks are interested, reach out to Sally.
So in some ways, this API is a schema that other things can implement to plug in versus actually being a new API in the core.
Right. So we've done the discussion on what the API contract looks like and what the client to it looks like. The implementations are outside the core, and then your HBAs can just address to that contract.
Very cool.
What are the give 2 or 3 examples of the core metrics that are central to Kubernetes?
All right. So basically, core metrics is currently there is only CPU and memory usage. We'll introduce also usage of other, let's say, resources that are first-class Kubernetes resources like GPU or disk. To be honest, I'm not sure what is the status of disk and GPU. Is this already first-class schedulable resource?
It's alpha. And,
okay. Yeah. So
there's a lot to discuss if what we want to do with GPUs. Like some people in the community want to do time slicing. Yeah. Anyway.
GPUs are real in that I think customers are using them both in the wild and in more stable areas. But I think also there's still, as Derek just alluded, really ill-defined at this point. And so I think there's alpha and then there's really alpha. And Derek, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think GPUs are in the, they're a speculation and a hypothesis, but people are using them sort of state.
Yeah, so people can use them, but then they can use more than one of them, but they might not get optimal performance when using more than one of them because we don't have things like device locality and other topics like that worked out. So yeah, you can use them, but it might not be optimal.
Yeah, so the core metrics don't read the word core, I think, in the sense that it's used in other contexts. This has always been intended to be one of the early customers of API aggregation because the metrics data doesn't need to be stored in etcd, should not be stored in etcd, for example, right? So we've always intended to provide those metrics through a separate data path. And that's the intent here. They're core in that they're going to be needed not just for auto scaling, but also for scheduling. And just in general for things like keep control top. Users need to be able to understand some basic behavior of their containers in order to be able to successfully use the system. So the intent is to make that information available to the widest set of users that we can and surface it through the CLI and the UI. But it's not intended to be baked into the monolithic API.
We even had a great discussion about how we shouldn't call it core, but nobody could come up with a better name. So I urge everyone on this call who is instantly confused by the word core to come up with suggestions and send them to SIG Instrumentation.
Okay. Thank you. Challenge accepted.
Let's bike shed on names now for the next 15 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, not here.
Not here.
Yeah. Anything else from SIG Instrumentation? Any other questions? All right, moving on to SIG Off. Eric, are you here?
Yeah, can everyone hear me? Can someone hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Sound great.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, some updates from SIG Off. One of the big ones that's coming up is we are adding a threat model proposal to the community repo. What that basically entails is it's documenting a little bit of what the expected sort of security realms of Kubernetes are, what the security boundaries are, where potential attackers can come from, and what the actors are within the system. This came out of a bit of a conversation around multi-tenancy at the last developer summit and has been taken up by some of the Red Hat guys to sort of document this formally about what the sort of expected boundaries are and possibly what can happen when those boundaries are broken. I will go ahead and add a link to that proposal in the doc.
Yeah, I want to say that this work is super important. As an example, this week the security team got a report about a local DOS and being able to point to here's how we think about what's a security issue and what's not in Kubernetes today, and what we'd like to be able to say is a security issue in the future is super helpful. So thanks for people putting that together.
Also, the second thing that I'll talk about today is going to be about the pod security policy work that's being done. The pod security policies, what they basically are, is they let you specify sort of the types of privileges that a particular pod can have. So right now, let's say if you don't want to run, allow users to run a privileged pod, you have to set this either on your kubelet, a flag on your kubelet, or on your API server, and your entire cluster sort of either runs privileged pods or doesn't. Pod security policies are an introduction to the API that allow you to have dynamically say this particular component or user or namespace can run these kinds of pods, allowing clusters to have both pods with privileged access, things that need host networking, specific types of volume mounts, even into things like SE Linux contexts, and allow you to have a dynamic and different set of policies on a particular cluster. So an example of the types of things that you could do would be to say, I would like to run this, I would like to let things in this namespace not run any privileged pods. So this would hopefully be incredibly useful for clusters that require some type of privileged pods to be running in them. I know that for our self-hosted work, this is a requirement. And now people will hopefully be able to sort of pick and choose about what contexts get to have access to what privileges. So that is work that's been ongoing and is continuing to be ongoing. I don't know the exact state of alpha or beta that we're aiming for in this particular cycle, but the updated proposals for a lot of this work and sort of where you can look at the API objects that are introduced and active today is something that I will, again, link to in the doc.
Is this stuff, again, I'm going to ask the same question, is this stuff going in as part of core, or is it building on top of, say, the extensible admission controller work that's being proposed, so that we can move this stuff out? Because it sounds like some namespace can do stuff but not other stuff. That's a traditional sort of admission controller type of job.
Yeah, so this is actually already in core and has been for the last couple of releases. The specific object is a pod security policy. I forget exactly what API group it's in, but the recent work has been to get it interacting with RBAC, so you can define things like use RBAC to define where and who and can use particular pod security policies.
Yeah, so the plan definitely is, Joe, to get the admission control extension stuff moving in 1.7. And we're trying to make sure that between Google and Red Hat that effort gets staffed, and definitely we would welcome more help in that and many other critical areas. It's not really ready for prime time and can't be depended on. Yeah, pod security policy has actually been around for quite a while. So
are there new API objects then being introduced here, or is this just sort of?
No.
Leveraging ones that already exist, yeah.
Okay, so this is just sort of making two things that work right now work well together.
Right. Yeah. I think policy, like in general, this was kind of the first specific security policy we even tried in Kubernetes. So there's probably some opportunities over the next, couple releases to say maybe this is something that actually should be separated out and above and plugged in and just, iterated on in an independent fashion without any impact to users, for instance.
Yeah, I take a look at my architectural roadmap doc, formerly called the core layers doc, where I try to tease some of these things apart and suggest a direction we could go. And definitely I put what I call the governance layer policy stuff at the highest layer. I think we can move in that direction, but we really need to get the extension mechanisms like API aggregation, admission control extension. Those things actually need to be done and usable before we can start making those moves.
Is there links or something that can be added to the community document? I know that there's some people that I'm working with that would be very interested in getting involved. We're also looking at secure pods and how to deal with privileged pods being run in the environment. So if there's already ongoing work, it'd be really great to hopefully be able to contribute.
Should get involved in SIG Off.
Yeah, I'm realizing that now.
Yeah.
I thought a lot of this was in Signode. Silly me. So I missed it off.
Yeah, I have linked the specific proposals to in the actual doc. So just like GitHub issues, at least.
Okay, thank you very much.
And can you, Brian, link your document formerly known as into? Thank you.
Cool. Are there any other questions about pod security policies, or should I go on to the next one? Okay, cool. And then finally, there's active work that is being done by the Center for Internet Security, who's going to be releasing a benchmark for Kubernetes. So what the Center for Internet Security does is that they release various reports about particular technologies. They did this one for Docker and have done it for several other sort of big projects. And what it will be is very specific recommendations about the security trade-offs for setting specific flags on API servers or setting up clusters in certain ways. The nice thing about this is that they are focusing on auditability. So they're specifically trying to say this flag should not have this value, or so on and so forth, or this flag should be set. That will hopefully allow people to make automated scripts to sort of audit their own internal clusters. That work is ongoing, though they expect to sort of they expect to be finishing it up in the next 4 to 6 weeks, I believe. For those, and this is also anyone who wants to be involved in this particular discussion and forming this report is happy to, or is welcome to join. I will link to the relevant SIG Off mailing list item, and you can get an invite or bug somebody for an invite if you're interested in that work.
Yeah, can you send me an invite maybe, and I may forward it to some other people?
I don't have the power to send invites, but I will follow up with you and try to see if I can. I will CC you on the list.
If it's on this meeting minutes, then I'll reach out to you. Thanks.
Perfect. Yeah.
Hey, can I add a quick plug on the CIS hardening? Because in a lot of enterprises, that is the absolute go-to for implementation details in an enterprise. So the ramifications of this document for in-the-field operations of Kubernetes clusters cannot be understated. Like, if we're not all over this effort and putting in our input into this, we could see a severe impact on adoption in the wild of Kubernetes. So please, everybody, get involved with that and look at it and make sure those things are sane, because if we don't, we're going to have to live with those moving forward, and they're slow to change. So again, CIS standards are live and die for a lot of enterprises.
Let me just say that is exactly the right message, and I know we'll want to be involved in this. I think this is really big news. This topic came up yesterday with a customer, so this is a directly important thing to us. Thanks, Jason.
Cool. Yeah, glad we're bringing it up then. I have no other reports from SIG Off, so if anybody has any questions about any of these items, now would be the time. No?
Can you post something in the meeting notes about the right way to contact you or contact whoever to request the information required for involvement?
Yeah, I posted the form item that was being used to send out invites, and that is still active for those who want to be.
Okay, great. Anything else?
Nope, nothing from my end.
Okay, and that's it for the SIG statuses. And SIG.
So I just want to make a quick comment. I want to thank all the SIGs that gave updates here. It's super useful and helps everybody else on the project understand what you're doing and opportunities for cross-SIG collaboration. So thank you very much.
We have next week's SIGs all scheduled up, but every week, every week, every video we do this. So please feel free to sign up and join us and share, because these have been nice and meaty this time as well.
If we have time, I could do storage, or if you want to wait till next week.
I think next week you're on the schedule for next week for storage, but we still have David, and Sid has appeared in our video as well.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and track back to the demo, a 10-minute demo of Auditory Cloud Providers.
Yes.
There you are. Okay.
Should I go now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right. Okay. So first of all, sorry I wasn't here earlier. I honestly thought I was presenting tomorrow. So sorry about that. Anyways, I'll go on and present this. So 6 months back, I started working with Tim Hawkin to move the cloud provider code out of Kubernetes. And the reason was the cloud provider specific code was tied into the Kubernetes release and release lifecycle. So if AWS had to put in a critical security patch, they had to wait till the next release before they could get into Kubernetes. And the way we did it was we created something called as the Cloud Controller Manager, which is a new binary which everyone will start deploying in the future releases, hopefully 1.9 or 2 or 1. Yeah, the release after that. I'm not sure about the timeline right now. The Cloud Controller Manager takes over all of the cloud provider specific calls that were being made by the kubelet, the kube controller manager, and the kube API server. And the final PR to finish this change is actually out, and Lucas just LGTM'd it this morning. I'm going to show you a setup that I have on AWS where all of the cloud provider calls are being done from the Cloud Controller Manager, and the rest of the Kubernetes binaries, such as kubelet and kube controller manager and the API server, do not make any provider calls. So let me share my screen and I'll start the demo. Share. Okay. So I have two hosts. I've already logged in here on my terminal here. So I call the first one kube master, and then the split screen. Oops. This is kube slave. Now, what I do is I don't use kubeadm or kops. I just started directly. So I have the API server, scheduler, and controller manager running here. And on this node, I have kubelet. I haven't even started it yet, but I'll be running kubelet there. And proxy will also be running on the slave node. So when I start the kube controller manager, if you notice, I've set the cloud provider to external. This instructs the kube controller manager to not load any of the cloud providers and just expect that an external cloud provider, external controller will actually take care of it. The same flag will be set on kubelet 2 when I start it. So let me first start the Cloud Controller Manager. So the Cloud Controller Manager is the binary that I was talking about. This binary has all of the controllers that the Kube Controller Manager originally had that did cloud provider calls. And it also has the parts of kubelet that did cloud provider specific calls. So when the kubelet starts up, it talks to the cloud to find out the addresses of the node that it's actually running on. It also talks to the cloud to find the individual ID, which we call the provider ID. Now I've made changes in the kubelet and in the Cloud Controller Manager such that when the kubelet starts up, it starts the node with a non-ready status, which sets a taint actually, which says the node is not schedulable. No pods can be scheduled on it. And then the Cloud Controller Manager listens on node create events, and as soon as it's created, it goes to the cloud provider and then extracts the node addresses, zone, the instance type, and it populates it back into the API, and then marks the node as it removes the taint and marks the node as schedulable, so you can actually schedule pods on it. So I started the Cloud Controller Manager already. Ideally, in the demo, I would have started it on live, but I wasn't prepared because I started tomorrow, so I just have it running already. So if you notice, I start the Cloud Controller Manager similar to the Cube Controller Manager, except I just set the cloud provider to AWS here. This is the only binary that has cloud provider specific code. And the reason this is considered out of tree is because this binary will only be a library within the Kubernetes/Kubernetes repository. The AWS folks will have to fork this library and then implement their own cloud provider on top of it. The existing cloud provider interfaces are still used here, so they can just take the existing AWS code and compile it with this library. And when you compile it, the binary becomes the Cloud Controller Manager, which is what I've done here. And I'm going to start kubelet here. I've set the hostname override, I've set the API server's IP address, and I've set the cloud provider to external. So kubelet does not start any cloud providers. It doesn't initialize any of them. So the node will not get the node IP addresses, the various cloud node IP addresses like the private and the public IP address from the kubelet. It will get it from the Cloud Controller Manager. So if I start it, it starts up, it successfully registered the node. Now, if I go to kubectl, YAML, and then if you notice it has the region, zone, and if I scroll down further, it has the node addresses haven't been initialized yet. The Cloud Controller Manager will initialize the node addresses. At this point, it only has the IP address, the private IP address, and the hostname. But on the cloud, it actually has public IP address too, which will be populated soon if everything is working.
Just a reminder, you got about 2 minutes left.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Well, it worked last time. So then once it adds the IP address, your node is marked as schedulable, so it won't have the taint on it anymore. Already doesn't have the taint. Okay, so there are no taints on it. The other operation that the Cloud Controller Manager does is whenever a node gets deleted from the cloud provider, it marks the node as not ready. So if I go to the cloud provider and then I stop this node, just stop it. The Cloud Controller Manager, the Kube Controller Manager, which keeps getting the status of the node. So yeah, this is closed, so it's switched off. The SSH connection terminated. The Kube Controller Manager keeps monitoring the status of the node, and it marks the node as unknown status because it's not able to reach it anymore. Then the Cloud Controller Manager, if the node status is unknown, it goes and queries the cloud provider to check if the node is present there or not. I have to actually delete it in order to make it go away. Then if the node is deleted, get nodes will delete that node from the API. So that's all is the demo. The one other task that the Cloud Controller Manager does is set up load balancers in the cloud if you create a load balancer service. But yeah, there's no time to show that. And I'm also writing a doc for how to write your own Cloud Controller Manager. So I'll publish that soon and post it on the Kubernetes blog, hopefully. If you have any questions, you can ask me.
Really great work. That's fantastic.
+1 to that.
Thanks.
Okay, this is David Wheeler. Am I next?
Yes, sir, you are. Go ahead.
And apologies for the short time.
Okay, well, how much time do I have?
7-ish minutes.
8.5 minutes?
I'm sorry, 8.5 minutes. All right, I can talk fast. All right, so let's see here. I have a bunch of slides from a presentation I gave at Lake Tahoe, and I thought maybe that might be, I'm not going to have time to show them all, of course, but I thought that might be useful to do a quick introduction. So first of all, in the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, if you want to graduate, there's various criteria. One of them is this bullet that may be a mystery to some of you. It's Achieving and Maintaining Core Infrastructure Initiative Best Practices Badge. Well, what the heck is that? So I'm going to talk to you real quick about what the CII is. We can talk more later because I'm not going to have time to probably answer everybody. But basically, the CII Core Infrastructure Initiative is another Linux Foundation project. And the basic idea is it's not the case that all open source is insecure or that it's always secure either. You know, some more secure than others. And Heartbleed in OpenSSL basically kind of triggered the CII's creation. The CII does a number of different things. It funds specific projects that are in bad shape security-wise but are widely used. But there's so many projects you can't fund everybody. So it's also trying to do some holistic solutions that are going to more likely help open source security generally, and that brings us to the badge. The theory behind the badge I don't think is particularly controversial. The idea is that open source software tends to be more secure if it follows good security practices. But you know, how can we encourage them? How can anybody know if those are being followed? So the idea is pretty straightforward. Let's create a list of criteria for some of those basic, you know, what should an open source software project do based on what current open source projects that are run well do. And then we've created a little web application to let open source software projects self-certify. I'll show you what the site looks like in a moment. But if you remember nothing else from today, you can go get yourself a badge by going to this website, Best Practices Core Infrastructure.org, and sign up and work to get your project a badge. So let me talk real quick about the criteria. In essence, we have only one badge level called passing. We are working on higher levels, but really for most people, passing is what we're expecting folks to hunt for. There are 66 criteria, 6 groups. Shouldn't take you more than an hour to fill it in, and for most people, it takes a lot less. Now, how do you get a badge? You know, there's a bunch of criteria. You then have to figure out a grading system. So this is our grading system. Most of the criteria are must or must not. They have to be met. There's some shoulds. They have to either have to be met or you have to justify why not. And the suggested, you simply have to answer whether or not you meet them or not. At that point, we're kind of appealing that people don't like admitting to the world they don't do something. We've got a number of projects already have badges that you're probably already familiar with: Node.js, Linux kernel, curl, GitLab. The current OpenSSL, though not the original one we found retrospectively missed a whole lot. Let's see here. I'm going to skip through. We can show some pretty graphs. Here's some other ones that have gotten more recent badges, anywhere from Apache libcloud and so on. We got some interesting comments. So people seem to be generally receiving this positively. The OWASP ZAP folks, for example, develop a widely used web application scanner. Some of you may already be familiar with it. But in fact, there were several things that they knew they should be doing and weren't doing. And the project lead said, you know, this process helped them improve ZAP quality, help us focus on areas that most needed improving. Common Mark made changes, like for example, getting TLS on the website. So basically, we've really tried to make this practical. Let me show you what the front page looks like, because I'm really running short on time. Well, whoops, I'm gonna move this off here. So basically, this is what the front page looks like right now. You click the big green button. Well, you'll need to log in first, and you can say, here's my project, and start the process. If you're curious what this looks like, the badge application is itself an open source software program, and to prevent hypocrisy, yes, we get our own badge. So here's the various categories. So for example, there's security or quality, and then there's a number of questions for each one's met, unmet, some are not applicable, and the question mark simply means we don't know, that's not filled in. We do try to automatically fill in some of this. For your amusement, I can show you some graphs of over time. This is the number of projects that are participating, and at various level percentages, that 100% that means they've actually achieved the badge. So we've gotten people more and more over time working towards badges. And you can actually see our list. I can talk a lot more, but I have no time. So why don't I stop now and try to answer questions? I bet you've got some.
So is the ask for someone in Kubernetes to go ahead and start doing this?
Someone has already started. For the record, that's me. I have already started this.
Great.
And I have reached out to David also to go through the last of the things that we have not accomplished to find out what our delta is, and to try to get us through to do it. It is a requirement for us to graduate from the incubation within the Cloud Native Compute Foundation that we get the CII badge. So we remain a CNCF incubator project until we have this plus some other criteria which we can work through. But this is definitely in our critical path on that. So the work is happening. It's more an introduction to the work.
Yep. And there are ways to actually show, I can expand the panels, how everything met, and it's not hard to find some of these.
So there was a question in the,
you just haven't filled it in. Sorry?
There's a question in the chat that maybe you can answer, which is, does this overlap with the CIS?
With the CIS, not really. I mean, the CIS, you're talking about the CIS standards for configuring a tool, right?
This does not overlap.
This does not overlap. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. No. Okay. Yeah. This is more about things like, do you have a test suite? Are there people who know how to write? What the basic approaches, principles for designing secure software, and what are the common kinds of vulnerabilities that happen?
We've lost our room, so apologies. I'm going to kill our video at least.
Yeah, real quick, since we are out of time, Jason, can you do the reminder for the 1.6?
I can. Everybody here is super important. If we want our 1.7 release to be even more rocking than 1.6, please go to the document that is linked in the notes and add your things that you'd like to see done differently, and also put your initials by them so that in the meeting tomorrow we can speak to it, or if you need to delegate somebody to speak to it, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Yep, and the last bit is Lucas removed the Docker multi-node instructions, but those were old and that didn't seem like a very controversial move, and everyone applauded it. So with that, any last minute issues before I give everyone their time back? Okay, great. Thanks everyone for joining. Those of you listening on YouTube, please share this with your friends, and we'll see everyone next week. Thank you very much.
Woo, thanks
very much.
Thank you, David.